I never thought the beginning of the end would arrive on such an ordinary afternoon. It was Thursday, almost 8, and the steam from the stew was fogging up the kitchen tiles, while the news murmured in the background. I had a half-finished beer on the table and my phone face down, as if that could somehow ward off bad news. Everything seemed routine, almost boring, until Lucia placed a plate in front of me without looking at me and said that phrase I still hear when I close my eyes. Stop making dramas. If I want to invite my ex to sleep at our house, I will, said my wife, looking at me with contempt. For a second, I thought I had misheard. I don't know if it was the tone, the contempt drawn on the corner of her mouth, or the certainty with which she crossed her arms, like someone putting a full stop to an imaginary argument. That left me breathless. I blinked a couple of times, trying to arrange the words in my head, as if they could somehow change meaning on their own. I was waiting for her to laugh, to say it was a joke, to let out that dark humor that always appeared when things got tense between us. But no, she stayed there, leaning on the counter, nailing into me eyes that were no longer those of my wife, but those of a defensive stranger. Sorry, I managed to say, and my voice came out higher than normal. Lucia snorted, rolling her eyes to the ceiling, as if she were talking to an elementary school kid. Just stop making dramas. It's my house, too. If I want to invite Gabriel to stay, I will. That name, Gabriel, she said it casually, as if she were saying a work friend or my cousin is coming to visit. But no, it was Gabriel, her ex, the guy who had always been a long shadow between us, a poorly closed memory that insisted on slipping through the cracks of every conversation about the past. I gripped the beer between my hands, feeling the cold glass, try to hold on to something that wasn't the emptiness beginning to open in my chest. Why would you want to invite him to sleep here? I asked, and every word weighed on me as if I were carrying boxes. She shrugged with a naturalness that hurt, because he's coming to the city for work and has nowhere to stay. Besides, we're adults, Martine. What happened between us is over. Or are you going to say you're still jealous of someone from the past? The accusation was there, wrapped in sarcastic maturity. We're adults. That phrase used to justify anything. Being adults apparently meant swallowing jealousy, discomfort, and sometimes even dignity. It's not that. I lied. It's just that I don't see it as normal. Lucia smiled ironically, and that smile hurt me more than any shout. Of course, because your concept of normality is that I live in an emotional cage. Always the same, Martine. Control, insecurities, jealousy. It exhausts me. I wanted to tell her that I had never controlled her, that if anyone had been adapting, yielding, bending in the name of peace, it had been me. But I stayed silent. In the scene she narrated, I was a controlling villain. In mine, the guy who swallowed his doubts so as not to lose her. I stare at the plate of rice with chicken, both of our favorites, from when we first started living together. I remember the first time she made it in the small apartment we shared at the beginning, when we still didn't have enough furniture and ate on the floor on a blanket. There she was, laughing because the rice had stuck to the bottom of the pot and me telling her it tasted better that way. At what point did we go? From that to arguing about whether her ex was going to stay overnight in our house? I swallowed hard. Lucia, it's not normal that you want your ex to sleep here in our bed. In our house. Who talked about the bed? She cut me off, raising her voice. There's a sofa bed in the study. Don't dramatize. Really, I find it incredible that at this point you still don't trust me. The word trust hit hard because yes, I trusted. Or at least I thought I did. I trusted when she went out with her friends and came home late. I trusted when she said those midnight messages were from work. I trusted even when her silences grew longer and her sighs more frequent. I had closed my eyes to many things, convincing myself that trust was also that. Not asking too much, not wanting to know everything. It's not a matter of trust, I murmured. It's a matter of respect. She clicked her tongue. Oh, now you're the martyr of respect. Look, Martine, I'll tell you once. Gabriel is coming. He's staying one night, 2 at most, and then he leaves. If you can't handle that, the problem is yours, not mine. I didn't understand where that aggressiveness came from, that way of cornering me. When I met her, she was warm, sweet, with that humor that disarmed any argument. She had a way of looking at me that made me feel chosen, almost special. Now, instead, she looked at me as if I were an obstacle in her path, something to endure, not someone to love. "Since when have you been talking to him again?" I asked, because suddenly everything became suspicious. Lucia tensed her jaw. That minimal gesture betrayed a lie even before she spoke. For a little while we ran into each other on social media. Nothing serious. He's a friend. Friend, the most overused word of all. The perfect wild card when what you want to hide is something more. I thought of all the times I saw her smiling alone in front of a phone screen in recent weeks, the laughs that came out of nowhere, how she went to the bathroom with the phone in hand, and took longer than usual to come out. Suddenly, everything took on another shape, and it didn't occur to you to mention it, I said. Not once, because I knew you would react like this. She shot triumphantly, as if the mere existence of my discomfort confirmed her version of events. And look, I wasn't wrong. A thick silence fell. The news kept talking about politics, economy, things that no longer mattered. I felt a buzzing in my ears, the typical dizziness that appears just before something inside you breaks. "Lucia, look at me," I asked. She took a few seconds. But finally she did. Her eyes, once a refuge, were now hostile territory. "Would you like it if I invited an ex to sleep here?" I asked. "Would it seem normal to you, adult?" She hesitated just enough for me to notice a tiny crack in her certainty. "It's not the same," she answered. "You don't have a mature relationship with any ex." "I do," I almost laughed. Mature relationship. How easily words were used when they suited. "Perfect," I said, with a colder tone than I expected. "Then let's do something simple. If you want him to stay here, I need you to understand that it hurts me and that if you care even a little about what I feel, you won't invite him. Not because I forbid you, but because you know it hurts me." I saw her bite her lip. For a second, I would swear something in her gaze softened. A small flash of guilt. But it was quick, fleeting. It went out immediately. "You always turn everything into emotional blackmail," she whispered, shaking her head. "It makes me feel like a bad person for wanting to do what feels natural to me. I'm going to invite him. Martine, it's already decided. If you want to stay in this relationship, you're going to have to learn to trust." The phrase hit me like a sentence. If you want to stay in this relationship, suddenly it was no longer about Gabriel or one night on the study sofa. It was about something deeper, a breaking point. Either I accepted her rules or I was out. Rage rose suddenly, mixed with sadness, humiliation, and a weariness I had been accumulating for months. I wanted to scream, bang the table, tell her I wasn't going to let her trample me like that. But instead, I heard myself say with a calm I didn't feel, "Do whatever you want." Lucia raised her eyebrows surprised. "What? Do whatever you want," I repeated. "But remember this conversation. When things break completely." She laughed, a joyless laugh. "Now you're threatening to leave me." "I'm not threatening you," I replied. "I'm warning you that everything has a limit, even what I feel for you." The silence that followed was worse than any fight. She picked up the kitchen cloth and started cleaning an invisible stain on the counter. I started eating, though I tasted nothing. The rice was perfect, the chicken juicy, but in my mouth everything was ash. On television, a journalist was talking about an economic crisis. I thought the real crisis was happening in that kitchen, in front of a plate of food no one was enjoying. The crisis of a marriage that was starting to fall apart while both of us pretended it was just another argument. That night we slept back to back, like two strangers sharing a room out of obligation. The space between us in bed felt like an abyss. I could hear her regular, calm breathing, as if what she had said was something normal, a minor disagreement. Meanwhile, the phrase kept coming back to my head over and over, hammering. "Stop making dramas. If I want to invite my ex to sleep at our house, I will." I realized there in the darkness that something essential had broken. It wasn't the day I learned the whole truth, nor the day I saw what I never wanted to see, but it was the day the fall began, the exact moment when, without knowing it, I started becoming a victim of the infidelity of the woman I still loved. And the worst of all is that at that moment, I still wanted to believe it was just a misunderstanding, that somehow love would be enough to save us from the disaster that was approaching. I didn't know the worst was yet to come, that the night Gabriel crossed the door of our house, nothing would ever be the same again. There was no need to look at the clock. The doorbell rang on time with that typical insistence of someone who feels expected and still wants to make it clear they have arrived. Lucia had already cleaned the house twice, fixing cushions and changing sheets, making sure everything looked perfect. She walked nervously, but pretended the scene didn't matter to her. I, on the other hand, felt my stomach tied in knots. When I opened the door, I saw him, Gabriel, tall, confident, with a perfectly trimmed beard and the smile of someone who knows he is welcome on someone else's turf. His hug with Lucia lasted a couple of seconds longer than necessary. That kind of hug that to innocent eyes is just courtesy, but to mine was dynamite. Gabriel entered as if the house were an old friend, took off his jacket, and held out his hand to me with insulting confidence. "Martine," he said, "thanks for the hospitality." The tone of his voice was measured, neither humble nor overly cordial, just the right balance to not seem provocative, although it was. I faked a smile. "Welcome. Come in. Make yourself comfortable." Lucia watched us, measuring our every reaction. She made coffee, cut cheese, brought out the special wine I had saved for our anniversary. The sofa bed was set up in the study, but Gabriel left his suitcase at the entrance, as if leaving the doubt floating. Dinner was a wordless chess game. Gabriel told anecdotes from his trips. Lucia laughed in a different way with complicity I hadn't seen between us in years. My role was that of the neutral, smiling host, while inside every gesture burned into me. When it was over, Gabriel offered to help with the dishes. Lucia accepted, delighted. From a hallway, I saw their shadows talking under the dim kitchen light, whispering things I couldn't hear, but that I imagined dangerous. That night, I went to bed alone, because Lucia declared she would stay chatting, catching up. I decided to wait. I pretended to close the door, but came back stealthily, phone in hand, and recorded a short audio. Laughter, confidences, the murmur of two voices too close. There was no irrefutable proof, but there was a growing intuition. The next day, everything was even more evident. I noticed how Lucia got ready differently. Gabriel showered and came out to have breakfast with me at the table. Lucia could barely hide her nerves. I took advantage, and while Gabriel and Lucia were talking in the living room, I checked her phone. I didn't see deleted messages, but I found recent calls to work. When I redialed the number, the caller ID confirmed my suspicions. It was Gabriel's. I photographed the call log, the times, the details. Everything would be saved. The next step I took that afternoon. I discreetly installed a spy app on the family laptop to monitor messages in case something slipped through. It was no longer a matter of jealousy, but of survival. I needed proof to avoid being the crazy one in the story. The tension rose. Gabriel seemed increasingly comfortable in the house. He laughed at my jokes. He asked me trivial things, but his eyes always went to Lucia. At night, Lucia danced an old bolero with him in the living room. They pretended it was out of nostalgia, but the electricity was evident. When I saw them sit together on the balcony, I took a photo from the hallway. The image was clear. Them, shoulder to shoulder, hands almost touching, Lucia leaning toward him. I saved the photo, adding it to my secret folder. The following early morning, I heard slight noises in the study. I got up stealthily and saw them talking under light. Too close. I pretended to go in looking for water and greeted them naturally. "Can't sleep?" I asked, measuring their reactions. "We're just talking," said Gabriel, looking at Lucia with a veiled smile. "Go back to bed. It's late," I replied, and went back without waiting for an answer, but satisfied at having caused discomfort. During the day, I started planning. If Lucia wanted to play with my dignity, I would be a better player. I dedicated myself to gathering more evidence. Recorded conversations, messages recovered from the phone backup, photos of that undeniable closeness. Everything archived in a protected folder in the cloud, waiting for the key moment, for the final dinner. Lucia served a roast and toasted a friendship. Gabriel thanked everything with a direct look into my wife's eyes. I joined them with my glass raised. savoring not the wine, but the metallic taste of betrayal and the revenge that was growing. When that night Gabriel made a move to say goodbye, I recorded again his long, tight hug, Lucia's hand on the back of his neck. For an instant that was eternal. In the light of the doorway, my wife whispered something I couldn't hear, but thanks to the hidden microphone, I knew she said, "See you soon. I hope you don't take long to come back." I smiled outwardly, but inside, I finished closing my plan. I had what I needed. It was no longer just intuition, now it was proof. My revenge would not be screams or slamming doors. It would be patient surgical. I thought of all the small details recorded and knew that when the moment came, everything would come to light, but only when she least expected it. That night, I slept better. The future no longer scared me, because for the first time in months, I had control. The next move would be mine. I woke before dawn, with a restless mind impossible to calm. The confirmation of my suspicion brought me no relief, only an icy clarity. For years I had tried to ignore small flashes of doubt, to keep standing a marriage that Lucia seemed to want to blow up. Now, with the accumulated evidence, the balance tipped toward lucidity, not love. Gabriel had breakfast with us as if it were normal, and Lucia served him coffee. She brought out her best laugh for his jokes and tried to direct trivial phrases at me, trying to make everything seem stable and everyday. But I only thought about the hidden cloud, where all my evidence waited: messages, voice notes, photos stolen from door frames. I had learned to hide my resentment under an impeccable mask. That day, I decided to be absent from home, announcing that I had pending work at the office. It wasn't true, but I needed time alone, away from the poison that was breathed in every corner. On the way, a plan was woven in detail. I was no longer just looking for the truth. Now I wanted Lucia to feel what it was like to lose the ground under her feet, to see her world wobble. When I got to the office, I downloaded every file to an external drive and wrote an anonymous letter titled Evidence. Simple and threatening. I kept the envelope in my briefcase and then sent a scheduled email to Lucia with some incomplete screenshots, enough to unsettle her, but not to reveal myself yet. Power was on my side. I knew at the instant I saw her cold and curt response on my phone. "What is this about, Martine?" I went home straight to the study, pretending not to have read the message. We didn't talk about the matter. Gabriel would leave the next day, and Lucia kept an uncomfortable distance, as if fearing to break something more. I saw her evasive look, her trembling hands for no reason. That night, I heard how as soon as Gabriel was asleep, Lucia went into the bathroom with the phone. I spied behind the door. I heard the low tone, the brief but significant conversation. "Yes, I know, me too. Wait until tomorrow." I moved the latch on purpose, so she would notice my presence. Lucia came out quickly and looked down, inventing a useless excuse. I had the certainty that the betrayal was complete, not only physical, also moral, the daily lie, the complicity with Gabriel, the silent conspiracy against this husband who once believed in her completely. When dawn came, I opened my laptop and uploaded all the evidence to a protected folder, ready to send to family contacts, to her mother, to her sister, to that WhatsApp group where she always shared photos of our perfect life. The mere fact of having this immediate control calmed my pulse. At dawn, Gabriel announced his departure, but not before kissing Lucia on the cheek, brushing her lips too close for the second time. I pretended not to see the goodbye at the door, although the image was recorded. As soon as the door closed, Lucia looked at me as if fearing the worst. There was electric tension in the air. At lunchtime, I confronted her. There were no screams or reproaches, just a cutting silence. "Do you want to tell me what's going on between you and Gabriel?" I asked. There was no anger in my voice, only the precision of someone who already knows the answer. Lucia tried to deny, cry, justify that it had been a slip, that she just needed to feel something different, that her intention was not to hurt me. I listened to everything in silence, cold, recording every argument and contradiction. "I know what you did," I told her, interrupting, "and I have proof." I looked at her with a determination unknown even to me. She knew instantly that everything was lost, not only trust, but the pristine image she maintained before the world. I showed her the phone, the audios, the cloud of documents, the The backups. I left no room for doubt. Her secret was no longer hers. I saw her collapse, go from anger to pleading. She insisted on turning back time, asking for forgiveness, swearing it had been a mistake, but I no longer cared. For the first time, I understood what it was to have control, to be the owner of a truth. I told her in a low voice that I wasn't going to say anything for the moment, that our story and her reputation depended on how she behaved from now on. I wasn't looking for reconciliation. I wanted to give her a lesson impossible to forget. I looked at her with a serene contempt of the kind that hurts more than any scream. "This marriage is over," I whispered, "but you will be the one to face the consequences. I will decide when and how your family, your friends, your whole world will know." I had compassion only for an instant, just enough to remember the last image of Lucia and Gabriel together. The betrayal in its simplest and most painful form. That night, I slept alone, no longer on the edge of the bed, but in the center, reclaiming the space that had been taken from me. The next day, Lucia's silence mixed with ultimate docility, like someone who knows that any wrong move can detonate the final bomb. Power was mine, and for the first time in a long time, I felt no pity for her. Only a bitter serenity, that of someone who has waited for the right moment to return the blow, and will do it when it hurts the most. The plan for my revenge had been built meticulously. It was not a visceral or quick response. I wanted Lucia to feel what it means to lose everything slowly. I knew that exposing her deception to those closest to her would be devastating. One afternoon, I gathered her family and mine. I put the phone on the table with the files open and ready. Lucia entered the room pale, trembling. Only then did I tell her it was time to face her truth. I saw her collapse before I even said a word. I showed the evidence, the conversations, the photos, the records. I exposed just enough without dramatizing, but making the magnitude of the betrayal visible. The silence was absolute. Her family reacted with surprise and bewilderment. Mine, with solidarity and sadness. Lucia tried to speak. She wanted to explain the inexplicable. But there was no room for justifications. From her lips, only a murmur came out. It wasn't what I wanted. It wasn't what I planned. Finally, Lucia left the house, accepted her guilt, and chose silence as her last defense. She left a short note on the table. "I hope someday you understand." I watched as the door closed behind her, without saying a word. The sound echoed on the walls, marking the end of a story where the search for justice ended up devouring what little love remained.